Hey everybody, welcome back to Soccerwise. David Goss and Tommy Scoops with you for another big episode, and it is an episode full of adults. Tom, it was your birthday this weekend. You are now officially an adult. You are on the back half of your life. How did it feel to have been alive, and how does it feel now to no longer be?
I should be concerned that more people have said, yeah, you're halfway over now that you hit 30. I guess who just the people who know my general habits and how I live, just not just in this job, but my nutrition sometimes and the swings that I can take. So I got to tell you, you're not the first person to say, hey, you're more than halfway through your life. So I should probably make some changes.
I was with a family member, though, recently who's in their 80s, who was like, your 40s and your 50s are actually where you thrive because you know who you are, you're a bit more established in your own mind, and then you can kind of do your thing. Was not what I expected to hear. And I don't know if he was saying that to me and I look like I'm 65, so he just thought we were commiserating about that, or if he was trying to get me pumped up for the future. Unsure in all of that. So I just wanted to pass along that energy to you and give you that same vibes. We were sad to not all celebrate together, but I got the Soccerwise partners together. It was herding cats. It was unbelievable to try and get everyone to put a video in. And then at the end, Morgan just goes, I need yours. And I was like, oh, me? I forgot about that. So then I had to pop that one in right there at the end, but we were so glad to celebrate with you. And we will do something in person at some point as well. Any highlights from the birthday experiences?
That video was honestly very touching. I don't even want to get too overly serious, but
do it.
I'm not a big birthday guy. I wouldn't even have talked too much about it. I was like, I'm turning 30. I should probably be telling people and letting people know. And I was... My wife tried to throw a surprise party because she's very thoughtful and she's the best, except what happened was one side of my family had a wedding, and the first three of my friends all who answered said that they couldn't go. And my poor wife was like, oh my God, it's going to be me, you, my parents, your parents, a couple aunts and uncles. Should we still do this? So I found out about the surprise. But as I was waiting to then go to the air quote surprise, thankfully nobody did the charade of surprise. The word got around enough that I knew. That's where I was sitting waiting, and that's when the video popped up. I was like, oh, this is really sweet. But yeah, just being around some friends and family and laughing and staring down the barrel of you're no longer in your 20s. And I will say I feel like I'm ready because Saturday was my birthday, so. I had breakfast or whatever with my wife, and then the afternoon was going to be the surprise party, not surprise party. And so I had some time there in between. And I think about being a modern adult of reflecting and consider, should I take some time here to think and consider and start planning some stuff out? There's a lot of big life events going on around me. And I had that thought, and I said, you know what I'm going to do instead? Fantasy baseball draft prep work for 2.5 hours. So I didn't have to think about any of that. And now I'm so locked in on the Mets and the Yankees middle relievers and backup catchers like you wouldn't believe. And I thought that was a more valuable use of my time.
I would agree. I think as someone, you're senior and you're elder, I think you're going about things the right way. I think you're handling things the right way. And you are putting yourself on a path to not have to worry about the end of your life because you're going to stress yourself out so much here that you're going to drop dead. The comments are great, by the way. Bangloff in the comment section says, you don't look a day over 45.
He's used that joke 4 times on Twitter already.
Nice. And Aqua NHL says Tom scooped his own surprise birthday party, which is a pretty good line as well. He's always working. You can't get anything over on him. You can't get anything by him. Boom. Scoop City, Scoop City. You had another one today as CF Montreal have let Laurent Courtois go. The first manager let go of the season, only 5 games into the season. For a CF Montreal squad, that reminder, they don't have an indoor facility right now. It is cold in Montreal, so they start the season on a 7-game road trip. So he does not get to manage a single home game this year. We will talk all about that. We've got some other things going on across Major League Soccer that we want to touch on. We're going to do a little buy-sell segment at the end. We've got some high-level things that you came up with and then deep-cut things that I came up with that you complained about and then I put back into the show rundown for us to get to. And of course, we are going to talk about the national teams in CONCACAF, USMNT, Canadian men's national team, Mexico, maybe a little Panama as well. I am curious how much money Montreal has that they could maybe funnel towards Panama and see if Thomas Christensen wants a new challenge. After the 2 finals that he's been up in CONCACAF, he would make sense for any MLS team to look at. I'm going to throw that out there and continue to push that until it happens, or more likely doesn't happen. In the end, Tom, I did our weekend recap show, which I do every single Sunday or Monday that come out, gives you all the headlines of maybe what you missed or what happened over the weekend yesterday. And I started, of course, with the national teams. And on the U.S. side, I said, just go listen to last Friday's show. We did a long 25-minute segment about what we want to see from the national team, what's missing from the national team, a lot of what everyone else is now talking about, desire, purpose, direction, all those types of things. And then we all sat down on Sunday, tuned in for another 90 minutes, and it was exactly the same. And I felt like there was nothing else I could add to what we had already discussed. Do you have anything else in your soul?
No, like you said, and I would push back on the we all point, because not a lot of people sat down in the stadium, just like not a lot of people sat down in the stadium, though I will point to CONCACAF as the issue there. Why in the year of our Lord 2025 we're doing these doubleheader in these type of games, and one of which starting at 4 p.m. local time. Just in Los Angeles.
When you have Will Smith inserted right in the middle, it's not really a doubleheader. It's actually more of a preview post-game show to the Will Smith performance.
And a Valère gift shop extravaganza, the bird, the CONCACAF seabird. That's the new mascot Valère. making the comic book was high on their priority list rather than, I don't know, selling tickets. But I'm not a business guy. I don't have an MBA. What do I know? They know more. So those are again, not even to even let U.S. Soccer off the hook here, because they've shown in the past that they've been content with stadiums not being filled, where you could maybe drop the prices and have people there. I don't even, an unnecessary stray, I guess, just U.S. Soccer at the moment. But I think it's just my apathy about talking about this right now, because we're having the same discussions, not only just from Sunday to Thursday, but from the last year and the year before that. Pretty much everything since the 2022 World Cup. And I want to go back to talking about this team then. And I think we can reframe this conversation based on what was happening, what has happened since. And you could argue that things should have been better, could have been better, whatever it is. I was very confused at the furor around the United States, air quote, being a disappointment at the 22 World Cup. They got to the round of 16. They lost to a better team. If circumstances were different, they could have beat the Netherlands in a one-off. They were not favored. I did not think that was a disappointment. I don't think they excelled. They weren't a crazy fun team. They didn't exceed expectations, but they didn't fall below expectations. And I think we're seeing that now. And more people, like now the common take outside of the you need to try harder, care more, all that stuff is, hey, just because you play at bigger named clubs doesn't necessarily mean everything is great. What I would say is, particularly that 22 World Cup team, we're a young team. They had a lot of potential. You don't win games right now in potential. You want to see the path continue to grow. It hasn't. And that's disappointing. But I feel like I'm just going to say the same things that I did in December and January around that World Cup, after Greg Berhalter was rehired, after Greg Berhalter was fired, after Mauricio Pochettino was hired, and now after this. It's just the same stuff over and over and over again.
Yeah. I think that's where the levels of frustration come from. And Mauricio Pochettino, I think, is, I wouldn't say struggling, but he's dealing now with a lot of pent-up energy that he's trying to manage. And I think he should understand on its own the frustration from back-to-back losses. If you want to call it a neutral site, you can. It's a home game. So back-to-back losses in home games to teams from your region that are beatable teams. This, again, we've said 5 million times, that doesn't mean disrespect, but like Canada and Panama are beatable for the U.S. because they have beaten them. And that
should be the standard.
Yeah, and he's now dealing with some of that blowback. So he should be dealing with some of that. Then you have the added on frustration, I think, coming out of the 2022 World Cup. I'm in agreement with you about the 2022 World Cup. I thought it was a fine performance. Yeah, if they hold on for a win against Wales, it shifts the perception maybe a little. doesn't really change the results. Like, they're still probably playing the Netherlands in the next round. They're still probably going to lose that game to the Netherlands in the next round. It just would have felt slightly different. I saw some quotes out there. I think one was from your former coach, Dave Ramos, who was like, the U.S. has wasted 7 years leading into this World Cup. I think that's false. I think it's choosing to not remember reality of what it looked like in 2018 and all the work that's gone into building up to this point and helping players in their development and creating pipelines for players to come through. So I think that's unfair. I think it's fair to question the year and a half after the World Cup, how it was spent, and having interim coaches and all of that. That doesn't help you take a squad to the next level. And I think with the national team, there's like always multiple conversations which people don't want to have. One is a lot of the work is done 11 years in advance. Building a lot of this stuff to affect the national team is really hard from that first team level. And everyone wants to talk about coaches. And like, it's amazing what Bielsa did in Chile. Bielsa could only do what he did in Chile because of the work that had been done the 15 years previously to build up the player development pool and help push players and help clubs build themselves up so that they could sell players. And then the talent is there. So sometimes the talent's already there and a coach can come in and play them a little bit differently, and that's enough. That's very rare, I think, at the national team level, because you have, 12 squads that are good enough to be in that conversation. And then you have other ones where it's like, yeah, you're taking them from a C+ to a B, and that's the challenge. The question is like, how do you win the World Cup and how do you build all of that? I think a lot of that work is fine. The complaint right now is like, what happens now once those players are 23 to 26 in the national team to push them forward? And I think that's the frustration for a lot of people. It's why I was one of those people that felt this was the right time to bring in a Jesse Marsh, who I thought would give them a clear way of how to take on games and win games. And I think you see from the red card this weekend and what happened, he has, one, an ability to inspire, but two, how does the U.S. take games on the front foot? And like, how is it that you go into games and U.S. players can step on the field and say, if I do these things, we're going to win. We're going to go out there and take the game from our opponent, where what we feel like we've seen for the last year and a half, 2 years is like, oh, we're talented. So we'll go out, we'll play decent soccer, and at some point we'll win. And the hope was, as Mauricio Pochettino came in, that shifted. That clearly has not happened. And so you hear comments from all the players, Pulisic sort of talking about not getting the ball in the right areas, not creating enough chances, not taking enough risks. I think the risk is a really big part of this, the fear of taking risks for the players on the field. And that comes back into like, well, what's the style, right? Part of high pressing is you take risks because you want to lose the ball because you can counter press. And like, we're going to win if we do those things. And it doesn't feel like there's an overarching picture here for a lot of these players to do this. And then you get into the conversation about, well, where's the effort, energy, and all that type of stuff? Some of that gets lost on me, and some of that I find a little bit boring, especially when it comes from specific former players, where you're like, okay, right, so do we go back through all the bad games you played, and do we relitigate how much you cared at that time, and why you didn't play well and why you didn't try? But it's unavoidable, I think, with a lot of the performances we've seen over especially the last week, but over the last year and a half, 2 years since the World Cup. And it's a worrying thing. You have this once in a lifetime potential next year, and everything was supposed to be built towards that. And the Copa America didn't go the way you wanted it to. And then you're back into this situation again right now where 2026 doesn't go the way you want to. And like, tournament soccer sucks. Sometimes the ball bounces the wrong way. Sometimes Torrenson Frings knocks it off the line with his hand. You don't go as far as you think you can. But like, this is that opportunity to reset the perception of all of this in the U.S. And that's what you're trying to build to. And you're trying to do everything you can to ensure some of that happens. It doesn't feel like this squad's there right now.
No, and so I go back and forth on the like desire and the passion and that stuff because you're right. Like, look, man, like it's just disrespectful to these guys at this stage of like, you know, as if they don't care, right? There is room. There's margins to this, right? Like we mirror the conversations we talk about. Let's say the Philadelphia Union and MLS. It's like if you're a high pressing team like that, if you lose that 5%, that's everything. So they are those margins, and I do get it. What I will say is, talk about Jesse Marsh too, and right, this is poetic that he's the Canadian manager, and he's you know, there's this rivalry that he's a main character of because of the history. The United States players, the locker room did not want Jesse Marsh to be the manager. That's part of what happened. That's part of why Greg Berhalter was back. I know that for a fact with several sources. I believe this has been reported, but I'm saying that yes, like that's all part of it. They don't. I don't know if that had to do more with play style or with personality or whatever it was, but they didn't want this style. They didn't want that manager. And here we are. Like, that's why Jesse's, like, some of the quotes have been like, yeah, no, I'm never managing that national team. It's partly that, and it's partly how he feels he was treated by the top of the organization when, like, I'll just lay out the timeline. He was in very serious talks with Leicester City. And then that didn't happen because it looked like I need to wait for the United States job. And it looked like he was going to get it. And then all of a sudden he didn't. And so that's where all the animosity comes from on a personal level, which that's the most human thing in the world. Like, I'd be furious too if I was Jesse Marsh. I'd be taking in a third place game. I would be so juiced, like, at any time. If this was a mini camp friendly, like a 5v5 tournament, I don't care. I'd have all of that on my sleeve, and that's what you use in the locker room and all that. He's a perfect fit for Canada. It's just that, like, I guess that's what it comes down to too, is that I think that this group should be better with the ball. They should be better at breaking down teams, but they just haven't shown it at all.
Well, and I guess what's frustrating is you come out of the Panama game and you say, and I understand that game states are going to be different in the Canada game. And, like, this is talking micro, not macro. And that's what's really hard about this with national teams. Like, you kind of go back and forth between the two. Does anyone care? Does it mean anything to anyone who's singing the anthem versus, like, is the left back underlapping or overlapping? You're kind of having both these conversations. But in the Panama game, it's like, all right, we're not creating chances through possession. Where's the moment where it's like, you know what? We're just going to have three guys make runs into the right channel. And we're going to have, whether it's Christian Pulisic drop back or Jack McGlynn get the start or even Weston McKennie, like, turn and just hit blind balls into that spot. And we're going to recreate the area that the game is played. And then we're going to harry them from there. And there's just, it feels like half things you could do to start to change the pace of a game. And the U.S. has been incapable of doing this pretty much since the 2018 World Cup or 2020 when all these players came in. Think back to Honduras in the First Nations League semifinal. Think back to some of the Gold Cups that we've watched. Think back to some of the World Cup qualifying in this region at home where the game states are like that and this team struggles. And then I think they're actually a little bit better at times when they play against the ball and when they play against some other types of opponents. And I don't know what the World Cup's going to hold because we've never seen a 48-team draw, and we don't know who this national team's going to be lined up against. You assume at some point you'll have to do a little bit of both. But it's frustrating to not see that next piece come in or at least try something new. And so it's like, if you keep trying the same thing, what's really going to change? And whether you could or should be good with the ball, it doesn't really matter. And so, like, try something new, make the game states a little bit different and see what happens in that scenario. And I know all of this is like, your hope would be there's a long-term plan and that they don't want to readjust things for one day, that they have overall. And I think I have the Mauricio Pochettino quotes on here for us, which is, it's better to lose now because I think we have time, Pochettino said after the match, because if we will be in this situation in 1 year at time, for sure, I will tell you, Houston, we have a problem, SOS. We are all disappointed and the fans need to feel the disappointment that we didn't win, but I'm not going to allow us to feel pessimistic because I think we have good players. We're going to find a way to perform, and for sure, we're going to compete in a different way. There's not really much else he can say. Right? He's not going to come out and be like, oh, we're screwed now.
Well, he could have done actually, if you look at the numbers, we actually performed. I think that was my biggest pet peeve about the Berhalter era. It's like anytime there's a disappointment, it was like, actually, we completed more passes in the middle third, so, we probably deserve to win. At least he came out and owned it. And, like, I disagree with it. It's better to lose now because we have time. Whatever, right? Like you said, what else is he going to say? But at least he wasn't like, we got unlucky, or, like, as long as the performance is there, we're going to keep going. Like, at least he owned, like, yeah, you're right, this wasn't good enough, but it's not an issue now. It'll be an issue in a year. Like, you kind of have to do that for yourself, too, of, like, preservation and keeping the locker room moving forward. And
you should have a plan, right? You should have a long-term plan that, while this isn't exactly on the track, there should be a larger picture in which you go in and out. The conversation, and we're getting a little bit in the chat, and I think Doyle may have pushed a lot of this, is the, like, these players aren't stars on their club teams and they don't really carry the game, and so therefore it's hard to do it here. I think a lot of that's fair. I've said for the last 4 years, and my big thing at the 2022 World Cup was the age of, just like, it was very rare for players of that age to carry a national team. I think I'm past a lot of that, in that even past national teams, there were a ton of guys who were not the stars. Like there are a lot of the U.S. has always been a team that brings players together who are not stars on their club team. Landon Donovan, an outlier because he played with the LA Galaxy, and so like he kind of chose to go find a place to be the star at his level. But outside of that, that was kind of the case forever. And so I think that one's a little bit harder for me. Also, that's the case with a lot of national teams. Like David Alaba plays like the 10 when he's on Austria if he's healthy. So it's
Alphonso Davies with Canada, like that's another one.
Yeah, although Fonzie did struggle until they put him back at left back at times. But yeah, 100%. So I think that's the case with a lot of national teams, and like it could be an excuse or it could be a reason for this group. I don't think it's an excuse. It will be interesting though what some guys choose to do over the next 12 months. Coming out of this camp, Kicker put out a report in Germany that the feeling is that Borussia Dortmund feels like Gio Reyna's time with the club has come to an end, that he has not reached the peak and isn't capable of reaching the peak they expected for him, and so he's going to be looking for a next job. That comes off the back of Mauricio Pochettino saying after the semifinal in the Nations League that he's not fit enough to play from the start. He got a couple minutes off the bench in this semifinal, or in the third place game. But he is one of the pieces that you're saying, can he be a leader for this team, or can he be sort of a central point, especially in the attack? His next move could be to a situation where you're saying, are you dropping down and becoming a central part of a team and making sure you get more minutes? He would be one of the many examples you could see of players moving into new situations where they could become that leader for their squad.
I agree with that completely, but again, like I'm just losing juice like on that because like, man, like this is 2022 all over again. And then let me guess, we're going to talk about who's the number 9, who's the goal scorer, who's the center back pairing. We just have the same questions. And like, I think that's my most disappointing part is I was hoping to see more tangible improvements. Like, again, if you played that, like showed a replay of that Panama game on Thursday, and then you said, you changed some things in the stadium. You said, this is the SoFi that just opened. Somebody holding, an older model of an iPhone. You put a picture of Greg Berhalter on the sideline. You could convince everybody that was 2022 or 2021. It all felt the same. And I guess it's my last point that, like, I'm rambling too much here, going too many different directions. To your point about, like, the play style and stuff. Like, I always have thought that this group of players in particular would be best at playing against the ball, as you said, Gus, whether it's transitional high pressing, depending on the game state, depending on the field tilt. That's where I think a lot of these players are at their best. And the Berhalter staff chose to, we want to value the ball. One, that's going to help us defensively. And two, when we play in CONCACAF, everybody's going to bunker against us. And I understand the thinking, but I've disagreed from the beginning of that's not what we're measuring on, right? Like, and then the other kick in the nuts here is that, well, 4 years later, we still can't break down a deep block.
Yeah,
What's it matter? We focused on this the entire time instead of perfecting or refining transition and playing against better opponents. And we're still not like under Berhalter, at least that they were winning Nations League, at least that they were competitive in a Gold Cup with a B team, right? Like, it's just unfortunate.
So I would have disagreed with you 3 years ago, and 4 years ago would have agreed with you 3 years ago.
Hold on, let me write this down just to make sure I have the time.
So, and then you can jump in a time machine and we can go have that conversation. I will both times.
AI.
What are you talking about? Berhalter's job was to make it back to the World Cup and establish a base. That I don't know that was going to happen playing high pressure. The other thing was I don't know if they were going to be able to build the system because high pressing takes a ton of like mistakes and trial by error on the fly because you have to be cohesive. I don't know that they were going to do that through World Cup qualifying because it wasn't really probably going to work in El Salvador and Honduras and Panama and all of that. That's why this cycle made sense. You don't have to qualify for the World Cup. Like if you had chosen someone like a Jesse Marsh, or if you had chosen Jesse Marsh, you had 3+ years to do it with no stakes against you, and you would have had enough time to build it in, and you would have had that style that you could build on what had already been established, right? We have a defensive base. We have confidence. We know what our spine looks like. We believe in some of these pieces clearly, right? Like a Matt Turner, even though he's not getting starts at his club team, like he is an established piece now in this group. Tim Ream is as well, whether he'd be in there or not. Tyler Adams, all those things. Like you've built a culture, you've built that. Now how do you build on top of that? And that's where I agree with you now, which is there has not been anything built on top of it. Let's move to Canada now and get out of this whatever loop cycle thing that this is. For the first time in 40 years, the Canadian men's national team has won back-to-back games against the United States. I said it on Friday, like, it wasn't the championship they wanted, but to play the U.S. and get to beat the U.S. was probably a pretty...
championship.
Well, it could have. I'm saying it would have been if they'd gotten into the first place game. Not a bad way to end up. There's a lot to talk about for this Canada team. I talked a little bit yesterday on the recap show about their depth. They showed the ability to change the starting lineup, to have a few different pieces help them. Fonzo Davies goes down early, unfortunate for injury. They're still able to get the result. But I do think this piece about Jesse Marsh getting the red card matters, because I saw some people online while it happened being like, whoa, when Jesse sees the replay of this Jonathan David slip, he's going to feel like an idiot. And it's like, no. Jesse Marsh was Gene Hackman in Hoosiers in that, right? He's throwing the notebook. Like, he felt that his team needed him to step up for them and have this moment, and then they responded. And, like, that's all that the manager's job is about. And he was in the elevator, getting in the elevator, apparently, when Jonathan David scored the goal. So he says he heard the cheer as the elevator doors closed and said, I hope that one's for us. Like, that's how immediate the response was from his team. And then I have this quote from Alistair Johnston to fit in here, which I think is amazing, which is, it's not in our DNA to roll around on the ground and play that way. I think you've seen that through Copa America. I think you've seen that through this tournament as well. We're just too honest of people. I think that he felt we were almost getting hard done by. People were taking our niceness and using it as a negative and taking advantage. So I think he wanted to take a little bit of a sign and stand that this isn't right. It's not fair that just because we aren't going to roll around and con people, we shouldn't get the calls that we deserve. Now, Alistair Johnson is taking some liberties in his conversation about this.
We're so nice. It's hilarious.
But it is in recognition from Jesse Marsh, and Jesse said it after as well, where he said the players felt that he didn't fight hard enough for the penalty in the Thursday game, and that there was not enough of a point made. And he said, I probably should have pushed harder on the previous foul that could have been a penalty against Tyler Adams. I didn't. Then I did it there. But I think it is a great recognition of what Jesse Marsh can bring to the team to help balance the team.
I agree. And also, like, again, like, I even missed the point of what you're saying, because that's too easy to be like, oh, this team's in World Cup qualifying. All they would do is end in a fight every game. And but I love
Richie's out here just drawing penalties.
Exactly. Yeah. And Richie, like, again, but that misses the point. It doesn't necessarily matter if it's true. What matters is every dude in that locker room believes it with their entire heart and soul. And guess what? Then they went out and won. Like, and I think that that's such, like, the cohesiveness from, again, that's a coach who understands his group. That's like, if Canada tried to possess the ball in a back three and play methodical, tight combinations, all this stuff, they wouldn't be any good. This team thrives the way they're playing. That's a manager who understands his group. That's a manager who, it's not as if Jesse would have played, 70% possession, even if he thought this team, like, it wouldn't have been a good fit. It's a manager that was a great fit for the team. And then the emotional side of this is, again, like, we can pick apart so many different parts of that quote from Alistair Johnson. But it doesn't matter if they all believe it and they're all moving in the right direction, in the same direction,
I think at this point, if you take this tournament and you put these four teams on just like a spreadsheet, and some people
games not played on a spreadsheet, mate.
And some people will argue about Panama and all of this. There's not a ton of difference between these teams. So it is the half measures.
Can't measure heart.
And the margins. And you can't measure heart. And Canada didn't probably feel like they had it against Mexico. They got taken out of the game, I think, after the penalty issue. And that's the other side of things, right? Is rather than react to that penalty in the Mexico game and push harder, they kind of got lost in the referee stuff. So Jesse took that on. It was no longer the player's responsibility in this game to yell at the ref. Jesse did that and established that pretty quickly by running on the field, screaming at the referee and getting kicked out of the game. So now the players can continue to focus on what they do best. And then Jonathan David stepped up and carried his manager. So maybe Jesse gets kicked out of this game. They lose, the subs don't go right, and it's on him. But you have these players stepping up and taking responsibility in this moment. They lost Alphonso Davies early. I thought Alistair Johnson swapped to the left side and was unbelievable in this game. This is one of the best games he's played for Canada. He is not naturally left-footed. He has not played out there a ton. He took Davies' space and was whipping in crosses and staying high while still being defensively sound, which is what he is elite at. And it was another sign of the depth of this team.
My one constructive criticism, I know that SoFi Stadium has about 75 floors because it's a spaceship. I think Jesse Marsh, you got to take the stairs on that one and be like, no, they offered me the elevator, and I wanted to roll up my sleeves,
raise my
elbow
rent.
grease. Yeah. No, like again, like jokes aside, like I'm not trying to be dismissive either. Like, I love this Canadian team. Yeah. I think that it's a manager and group that fits each other so well. The personalities, everything else. So I don't mean to steal your whole flow here, guys.
No. I've been there for 10 years. I'm glad.
That's what I'm saying. Like you should be kicking me. Like I just enjoy it. Like any team that has an identity and knows who they are, and more importantly, knows who they aren't. I think that's really rare. It's really difficult because we all want to be all these versions and have all these different sides. Like again, whether or not the next generation of Canadian players is quite like this or not, who knows, over the long term, whatever. Like, Jesse Marsh doesn't care. These players don't care. Guess what? They're going to go play in a World Cup, and who cares what happens in the 2034 World Cup or whatever the timeline would be.
In fairness to Jesse, he is actually working on some of that stuff. He's doing coaching clinics, all that type of stuff. So there is at least 10% of caring in that. It's not the focus of his job. It's not the focus of his role. And you're absolutely right. The other thing with this team is Ismail Kone and like Alphonso Davies, all these guys are young, so they'll probably be at the 2034 World Cup. Like they
should have picked something much further in the future. That was
they don't even have to stress about that. And then you keep finding players, and finding players is like a really interesting concept to talk about right now in light of some of the complaints about the U.S. men's national team. And like now that the pathway is so clean through the pro ranks for them from young ages, people feel like there's lost that little bit of grit where like Moise Bombito was working at Stade Saputo because he wasn't in the academy, went and played JUCO college, then played, I don't know, NIAC or MEAC or MEC or NEC soccer. Then he gets in the pro ranks. Ali Ahmed got cut from Toronto FC, ends up playing for Vancouver, works his way through the system. There are a decent chunk of examples of this, and I think you see it when it comes together for the team, and I think that's what a lot of people respond to when they watch this team and enjoy this team like yourself, where it's like, it feels like a Central Jersey squad and not Princeton Central Jersey, like the other parts of Central Jersey. On top of that, Mexico lifts the trophy at the end of this.
Good for them. Honestly, good for them.
Okay. You want to elaborate?
Like what I'm saying, I thought that it was going to be U.S.-Canada final. This Mexico team is as down bad as they've been my entire life. And I did not have really any expectations. I respect the hell out of Raul Jimenez and Santi Jimenez and like a handful of the players, but we've seen this so much, again, even dating back to 22 World Cup qualifying or whatever, right? Like they've just not been that good. So I didn't think that we're going to do buying or selling or blip or trend or whatever, you want to put on it. I was like, all right, this is who they are now until they prove differently. And then again, they got a couple penalties. Yeah, Raul Jimenez had a heater over 2 games. Yeah, weird things happen over a 2-game sample size, but I think credit where credit is due because of how much I think everybody has rightly criticized this Mexican national team. They went out and won, and that was a really big a really big trophy for them to, I guess, change the tide here. Like this would have been a great feeling for the United States. It would have been a good feeling for Canada, Panama, right? Like all this. So well done to Mexico.
That like blip you're talking about, that 4-year span for Mexico, it is not a coincidence that it goes in line with Raul Jimenez's head injury, right? And like him being this piece of quality on top of what they were that could elevate them. And I said it, I think, on yesterday's show or whatever. It's on Mexico that they were not able to find other ways to play without him, and they were never able to progress the team without him, and they kind of just kept going back to him maybe before he was ready. And Santi Jimenez's emergence now, fantastic. Now, he's the son of one of the greatest players in Liga MX history. It's not like this kind of came out of nowhere. Like, he's been developed to reach this point and has sort of found his own pathway by going to Europe that isn't maybe available to as many Mexican players because they're not having the foresight on their careers, and that's part of the issue. But one of the things for us, all the negatives of what Liga MX leads to for the Mexican national team, which is, keeping players and not allowing or not having them go push themselves outside of the league because you're paying so much money, all of that, it means the floor is pretty high because you have players that play on really good teams with really good players all the time who are going to be a part of your national team. And that's been the case the last 5 years. It's like the floor is pretty high. Now you get Raul Jimenez in form. You get Santi Jimenez sort of reaching his peak. It's enough to get them over the top. I don't know if it will be in a World Cup. I don't know if we're there yet, but CONCACAF's up for play. We've got a Gold Cup coming up this summer. It's going to be weird. Club World Cup is in the middle of it, so players who are part of Club World Cup will not be available to the national teams. That affects the U.S., it affects Canada, it affects Mexico a ton because of the Liga MX teams in it, the ones which we will learn of. Club Leon got pulled out of the tournament because they are co-owned by the same owner as Pachuca as they go into the competition. So we're going to learn a ton, I think, as well in the Gold Cup. We will have your coverage here of that, all of that at SoccerWise. It'll be fun to watch. And if any of these teams are looking for an additional coach to add to their group, they could go and hire Laurent Courtois if they want to. Because on Monday morning, CF Montreal, 5 games into the 2025 MLS season on 0 points. They have not scored a goal in 4 games since the opener, a 3-2 loss at Atlanta. They let their manager go. He is the 10th manager since 2012 when Montreal started, of course, with Jesse Marsh as the first ever head coach the expansion year, who then quit basically immediately after. And if you look at the last 10 years, you start to see a trend, which is coaches that do well leave earlier than they have to because they choose to, because they find it hard to work there. And then other coaches get hired and get let go pretty quickly. And Laurent Courtois, the next one on this. Let me read a couple of these quotes from the CEO, Gabriel Gervais, and then we can talk about it. He said, "It's been 4 weeks that we've been evaluating this. It's not just the results, but the performances. We're seeing a lack of cohesion and frustrated players. We felt this was the right time to do it in order to relaunch our season. It's not easy to be coached. There's a lot of turnover at that position, but we feel that it's the right decision." Gervais said the discussion to potentially replace Courtois started after their second game. A 1-0 loss to Minnesota United where the club managed 0 shots on target despite having 65% of the ball. In addition to the unsatisfactory on-field product, Gervais alluded to an off-field issue that contributed to Courtois' early dismissal but declined to elaborate. Marco Donadel, who longtime Serie A player and longtime Montreal Impact player, I'm opportunity to say Impact, so I'm just going to do it, played for the team over 60 appearances across 3 years in the Nacho Piatti years when there were some good times for this Montreal team. He was brought back as an assistant this year. He has been elevated to interim for now. What have you made of this over the last 24 hours since the news came out?
Just Montreal being Montreal. Like what? Like I didn't know that Laurent Courtois was going to be in the sack race here. But we should have. Marco Donadel should be on sack watch for who's the next manager in MLS that's going to get dismissed. Because Montreal should never, ever be out of it. This is a team that, so I think both things are true. This season has obviously been disappointing for Laurent Courtois and this team, but they start on this 7-game road trip. That happens every season. He did well last year. I think he overperformed last year, losing in the wild card round. Again, I know that doesn't sound like super high expectations and you don't want to lower the bar. This team has not spent a single dollar in transfer fees on a designated player in at least a decade. Victor Wanyama, Kiki Struna, and Georgi Mihailovic for 1 year were 3 of their recent DPs. They acquired Veroni this offseason. In an age of Major League Soccer where the difference between the biggest and lowest spending teams is going to continue to increase, and the importance of wage bill and money invested in global soccer has routinely confirmed, like, that is what is the strongest tie to season standing finish. MLS is a unique league, but it's not all that abnormal. Yes, you can compete like this sometimes, right? Like, if everything goes right. If you have, let's say, an assistant manager who you didn't even know was that good because Wilfried Nancy had to walk into the office and say, I want this job. And then they gave him like a 1-year contract, and then they extended it. And still, even when that went well, he was about to quit because of an argument with ownership. And if this team is we can talk about, no, they didn't score well, they didn't attack well enough, or they didn't defend well enough, or they didn't do this under Courtois, or what, well, like the man management that I guess he was alluding to in the locker room. Yeah, maybe all of that's true. What does it matter? Wilfried Nancy, we've been regarding as one of the handful of the very best managers in Major League Soccer. He did everything right. He still got to stay there for 18 months. And still, when it was very clear he wasn't going to last long in that job, when they had several players who were not going to be there much longer, overperforming, Ismail Kone, Georgi Mihailovic, Alistair Johnson, all sold in the winter. They had at least two DP spots open in that summer. They had Wilfried Nancy knowing it's going to be his last year because he wanted to resign before that. And you know what they did? They signed nobody in that summer. I don't know what anybody is supposed to do. Even if, like, and the funniest thing, and, like, I feel bad for the fans, man. Like, they have so much passion. They care so much. And they have hope. And I respect that. But somebody was like, you should call Jim Curtin. Why would he take a phone call? Why would he even take a phone call?
Yeah.
Like, so even if you got the top, like even hypothetically, you get Jim Curtin, what would that realistically change? I don't think anything. Maybe a little bit. And this is somebody, like, I have the most respect for Jim Curtin. I think he's a phenomenal manager. I think he'll make everything better where he goes. But within the constraints that this team has, within the instability, and part of that instability coming from the front office, Olivier Renard, one of the reasons he resigned or left was because he would negotiate a contract, he would have an agreement, and then ownership would say, no, you don't. And then once that happened a couple too many times, he said, all right, like, what am I doing here? I'm done.
Yeah.
Like, I don't see anything changing.
Yeah. The thing I kept coming back to when this hit yesterday was just the dream scenario for them is Wilfried Nancy. It is a coach who can elevate players bigger than the sum of their parts, that speaks French, that has a connection to the city, that has a connection to the club. That's the dream. And it hit, and they were not able to keep it in their grasp. So, like, okay, what do you hope happens post Laurent Courtois? Exactly what I just described. And you have the sort of the playbook, which is if it works, it's going to end anyway. After that, I would say on the spending side of things too, just for, as you said, it doesn't perfectly correlate in Major League Soccer. But one of the things that Montreal shows is the spending that you're seeing is across the whole club. And so, like, Philadelphia doesn't spend huge on DPs. They spend on the club, though. They spend on the academy. Yep. They spend on resources. Yep. They spend on staff, all of those. Colorado doesn't spend a ton, but they spend on other things, and they have a system, and whether it goes up and down, they stay fairly consistent. So that's just for everyone out there with Montreal saying, like, well, is it just down to DPs? No, but it is a sign of what the club is like top to bottom, which is why they're one of the thinnest clubs in Major League Soccer, and it's why it's not an ideal job for someone like a Jim Curtin to come into and be like, to be understaffed and under-resourced and have trouble bringing in players, having trouble having players be fully healthy all the year and having enough of the scouting that you want, and to do all the little things that you can do to overcome the fact that you don't spend $12.5 million on a player or $23.5 million on a player, because that's the league you're playing in now. And if you're not going to do that, you have to be good at something else. The club hasn't really chosen a lane like that. And so you end up in a situation where I think most people walk away from this saying, I don't know what else you could expect from Laurent Courtois. It is wild to me to say that in the second game of the season, you started having this conversation, because that means that you were on this in the off season and you're going to start a year and you have this 7 games on the road. You want to relaunch. Well, like, you never launch. That stuff just feels again, chaotic. And chaos, I think there can be good moments where it's like, oh, things are too settled in a squad. You need to throw a little chaos in to challenge people and push people. But for an organization, you don't want chaos. You want stability.
So that was the next point I was going to go to as well. So you say you're talking, like, if you're talking about this in the second game, did they think they were going to have 5 wins, a draw, and a loss on a 7-game road trip?
They went and should have gotten a result at Atlanta, who had just dropped $50 million. They lost 3-2 on a late goal at Mercedes-Benz in front of 50,000 fans. I came into that being like, oh, they're pretty good, and their XG's been fine across these games.
So Marco Donadel is named an assistant coach this winter, and only Laurent Courtois is fired, and nobody else on the staff is touched. And now, like, when Gervais came out, and, like, I was before the press conference I was here, I was like, no, I think that they're going to give the leeway to Donadel. It was very clear this is a guy that they think can be a manager.
Yeah.
If you're Laurent Courtois, like, you probably see the writing on the wall. Like, yeah. I just don't think that's a way to run a team either. Be like, hey, we just signed your replacement. Very clearly, we just signed your replacement. And for this to happen 5 games into the season, let me preface this. This is speculation. I haven't had somebody tell me this, but, like, I think you can use enough deductive reasoning to say that, oh, they hired this guy, and then he was the interim coach, and nobody else on the staff got changed. Like, didn't they make staffing changes in the winter?
Yes, they brought in staff, I think, that Laurent Courtois was more familiar with in assistant roles and academy roles. outside of Marco Donadel,
who
I believe I read somewhere, this is me now guessing, that Marco Donadel was in conversations with the club before Laurent Courtois got hired even. And so then his conversations with the club were separate from that.
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't know.
I would also assume the players could read that writing on the wall. And then here's the thing. With Courtois, a ton of changes to the lineup every single week. That's frustrating. It's frustrating as well with young players because you are trying to gain confidence with them. You're trying to give them opportunities. You gave up a lot for a Jaquil Marshall-Ruddy to put him in the lineup. Now, for the most part, those players have been replaced in the lineup with other young players. So it's not like he's leaning back on these veterans that you don't, it's not like what you'd say some of with Philadelphia, with Jim Curtin, where it was like, no, we actually want more of the young players to play, and that wasn't what he was doing because it maybe didn't lead to results at the time, and that wasn't the feeling last year. That's not really the case, although it has been slightly chaotic, and Caden Clark sort of gave a comment last week where he was like, I wasn't healthy 2 weeks ago. That hasn't been the case since. I don't really know what's going on. I don't know that Caden Clark gets a ton of leeway in this convo because of what's happened to him at the 3 or 4 clubs he's played at most recently and the way he's been pushed out of lineups. But like all of that, maybe it's one conversation that happened and the feeling was that he was not adjusting. That stuff feels, though, more fixable than we're going to fire a manager 5 games into the season.
Yeah, and like you said, like, again, I don't... Like, Caden Clark had a really good last third of last season. That's it. Like, do you sacrifice everything to ensure that the team is built around him? And, like, maybe the answer is yes. Maybe it is. Right? But, like, I don't think that's indicative of, oh, well, gotta make some changes, right? Like, I don't know. Like, again, just going back to... And I don't want to just be just narrow-minded of, like, well, if you're not spending big transfer fees, you can't, like, look at Minnesota United. They are not spending big transfers. They don't want to spend big transfer fees. But they identified a player like Kelvin Yeboah. I forget exactly how much he was something in the $3 to $5 million range. You have to be doing that. Philadelphia Union, even Damiani, Ure. Like, those aren't big fees, but that's something, man. Like, again, I keep on bringing up and I tweeted this and put it on Blue Sky, the list, the all-time designated player list with CF Montreal. It is bleak after Piatti, Drogba. Like, Taider was cool for a season or a season and a half, whatever it was. Wanyama had one really good season. Georgi Mihailovic, I don't remember exactly at that time if his contract was or was not above max TAM, but that's a player that's max TAM for everybody else. Victor Wanyama is a player who's max TAM for anybody else. Kiki Shruna is not a designated player.
Liram Jamaili, one of the best chins in MLS history, could literally cut diamonds with a chin like that.
But like, it's just... Yeah. I don't know, man. Like, you think about, what would it be, like 14 through 16, the like Piatti, the Drogba, like that series that they had, like opposite Toronto FC in the playoffs was legendary. Like the Canadian Classiques, like I still look forward to them, but like that was a different, like that's what it can be, and that's what these fans deserve. And again, whether or not you're spending, getting all the everything right. It's saying my connection is a little bit off. Am I still here? I was waiting for you.
You're good.
Okay, I was a little bit worried. Again, whether or not you're hitting on everything,
Can't
and like
handle your heat.
Their identity is acquiring players from within the league, and they've done that very well. But that cannot be it. And you cannot be like, hey, and again, Laurent Courtois was a manager who this was his first team job, and I like that. I like giving them chances. But it's like, oh, after 38 games, you don't have every single thing figured out? What's wrong with you? In this roster that is at a talent deficit to everybody else in the league? This is your fault, not ours. New manager. Oh, Hernan Losada, he shouldn't have been hired by us. Well, we're going to do it. Oh, after a year, we didn't like that very much. And like, it's, maybe Donatello's a really good manager. And again, if he is, maybe he's like Wilfred Nancy and he's somewhere else in a year and a half.
Yeah, that part I think is the part that's hard. Let me throw out this with the spending thing as well, which is, I think it's, so there's the DP conversation. There's the selling young players conversation, which I think is fair, right? The deals you got for Ismail Kone and Alistair Johnson and all of that are fair. I think it's then like your core inside of that, where it's like when you lose and bring in players like that, Kamal Miller and Rudy Camacho and pieces like that, they need to be the stable parts of your team to help the next group come through. And that's where it feels like those players don't really want to be there. They're not, I think, serviced the way they should be. And so they look at other organizations and it seems more attractive to them to go and play for those teams. And so you're always going to have ups and downs as a club like this. Colorado, who I just complimented, Philly, who I just complimented, they have those ups and downs. But there is a stability to it, which is on the down years, you're still competing for the playoffs. On the good years, you're at the top of the conference because there's a spine to the group of veteran players who are going to be around it. And Montreal does not create a culture where those veteran players stay. Unless you're Sam Piet, because you gotta.
But even that, like 28, like they should have just had a new contract, and like that was 100%. The one that Olivier Renard, I believe that was the one that he resigned over. But like, we know who would help this team a lot. Mathieu Choinière, and like you said, to bring around the young, to give structure to young players. I think what's super indicative of this team is you go from Wilfried Nancy, this beautiful, we want to pass through everything. We need players. Everybody needs to be brave to dribble out of stuff because we're gonna play with pressure and we don't care. Then you hire Hernan Losada.
Don't even do that.
Don't want any soccer players on the field. You don't want water breaks. You just want to kick the ball long and high press. And then after a year, you get Laurent Courtois, who's the second team manager of Wilfried Nancy. So at every point, you're just and like what Corey Ray did after he took over last summer, like what it was all about was like we need to clear the decks here so we can sign players who make sense for this new manager. Yeah. And again, I hope that Donadel is more aligned, or even if he's not, like I hope that it's a decision that, okay, going forward, this is going to be our general view. This is going to be our general philosophy. And so when you fire a manager every, 6 to 18 months, you don't need to, overhaul the roster every year when you're signing them to 3-4 year contracts.
All right, Montreal, that was the conversation. We couldn't avoid it. We couldn't get around it. Marco Donadel will take over as interim. You have said it. I think the line was they're not pushing to look for a replacement. Like he will get leeway as the interim manager. My assumption would be for the rest of this year, he is the manager. And if he does well enough, he gets the job full time. Well enough probably means making the playoffs anyway, that is, including the play-in. And you are probably back to what you did last year and the last few years. And then we are back into this cycle. I can promise you this, Montreal. I love going there. I'm going to be excited. I'm going later this year. I already know that. And it's one of my favorite places to go. Let's talk Major League Soccer now. Rather than digging through the weekend, I gave some highlights yesterday. We're going to talk about some of the trends that we've seen so far, especially the unexpected ones. And we're going to buy or sell or whatever other phrase you make up in the next 40 seconds for that here at SoccerWise. But let's start with a little bit of news outside of Laurent Courtois, which is Sounder at Heart connecting English winger Ryan Kent, a 28-year-old longtime Rangers player, most recently at Fenerbahce, got pushed out of the team by Jose Mourinho, looking for a club right now, is in talks to potentially join the squad. What do you make of this, and do you think that this is something Seattle should be doing right now?
If Seattle can fit this in their budget, which I've been waiting for an MLS team to be connected to Ryan Kent. I wouldn't have guessed Seattle. Maybe
you've got the Ryan Kent stock ready to go.
Any idea what youth team he came through?
Oh, is that Everton?
No, like. If he's, so I didn't know what the conversation, if anybody was even reaching out and like if he would come on a non-DP deal or whatever, right? Like this just is somebody I thought who would make sense if you're able to get him on a TAM deal. I didn't think Seattle had any room in the budget. If he's able to be fit in under, the season-ending injured stuff for Paul Arriola, I think this is a no-brainer and this is a home run. I think that several MLS teams should have been in on this. And again, that doesn't mean he's going to be like a game-changing player, though he can be, I think. It's that I think the risk is pretty low, particularly if it's a short-term deal. I believe Nico was reporting a deal through the end of the season with an option. And I think that's an absolute no-brainer for me.
Shout out to Nico Moreno, one of the best, by the way. Good friend of the show. We love Nico, who was the one that reported this. And I probably should have said that at the start. And as you said, this makes sense, one, because of the news that Paul Arriola is going to miss the rest of the season because of all the other injuries that have happened for this team. This does not feel like a game-changing DP signing, but it can be just another piece. And this is what Seattle does as well as anyone, which is, can we have 15 to 18 players that we think can keep the level and that we trust? Ryan Kent feels like he could be one of them. Or if he's not, as you said, there's not a ton of risk in there. So when it popped up for me as well, I didn't have as much Ryan Kent stock as you. But
you haven't played Football Manager where I would get him on loan as much as I could in the lower leagues.
Literally,
so maybe game's not played on a spreadsheet, but kind of in this sense it is.
Every person in either the Reddit or on social media that replied to this was either a FIFA card comment or a Football Manager comment.
That was a legendary FIFA card at Fenerbahce. Oh my God!
This is one of those. You are in good company if that's your reaction to this one. let's talk about some of the teams that have been a little surprising. We've got our high-end ones. We've got our deep cut ones for me. Let's start with the Philadelphia Union. They are one of the top teams in the league. They had a rotated squad. Nathan Harriel playing in central midfield. A ton of pieces missing for international duty against a St. Louis team that had pieces missing, mainly for injury, not for international duty. A little bit different. They won the Bradley Carnell Bowl, or whatever you want to call it. It was the 8th minute goal on the set piece. And then they were able to, I think, maintain performances throughout. St. Louis has their own issues going on right now. Olaf Melberg has talked about their lack of possession, their lack of danger in possession, and all of that. But we're going to do a little buy-sell here. We were going to do like sort of a high-level one for every team and then a more specific one. The high-level one, are you buying the Philadelphia Union as a top 4 team in the Eastern Conference?
I won't go that far, though I am buying them as avoiding the wild card game. I think.
Oh, well, they're not for sale for that, so you can't go. You don't walk into the store and say, "I'll give you $1.50 for this $3 thing."
Everything's a negotiation, bro. No, I don't buy the top 4 just because like. I think Miami's in there. I think Charlotte is obviously making their case. And then like Cincy, maybe Atlanta. Maybe we did the Atlanta United's back too soon for, I don't know, the 5th year in a row. But I think that there's going to be enough competition for that 4 spot or that top 4 spot. I think Philly will be in the mix. I think that they'll be closer to 4th than they are, 8th or 9th. But I can't quite get there after 5 games, though I am very impressed. And not to, I point out when I say things dumb or when takes age poorly for me. So I think it's fair for me to say I believe on a national platform I was the highest of anybody about the Philadelphia Union. So
you were the most bullish, so you are able. We'll give you a 25% off discount on your buy now because of how bullish you were. Because you were a founding member, you get 25% discount. By the way, meanwhile, you can join our Patreon and get you access to our Discord and get you access to our depth charts as well. If you want to become one of the original members of Soccer Wise, it's the best place to watch soccer in North America. I am going to buy this, and I'm going to buy this because of the depth that I've seen. And it's not just that they got the result this week. It's that you brought in what you thought was going to be a high-level center back, not even a starter at the start of the year. And you've now shown that you've got 3 starting center backs in this group. It's because you brought in pieces in central midfield that have hit it out of the park, including Jovan Lukic, who we're going to talk about in a second. No. Did I say his name right?
I think so.
I always want to call him Luka.
Because that the only reason I said I think so is because when you say it wrong, it sounds right.
I always want to call. Yeah, okay, I did say it right. So there you go. Who's hit it out of the park, but you still have options in that position that you've shown, and now you're showing the depth at center forward. That Darmian is the DP, the big piece, but Ty Baribo's on fire. He goes to national team. Darmian steps in. You're still dangerous. Ua, I think, has played very well this year. Has shown once again the things he can bring to a team. It's not always the finishing, but it's the running. It's covering ground. Gazdag misses the game. Quinn Sullivan's helped leading the attack. So I think for Philadelphia, the reason I have the belief is that the underlying numbers say it's real. And I don't think they're going to run out of steam because they're just playing as hard as they can in the first 4 games and other people aren't. I think that there's some real depth to this group that can continue to push. And all the teams you named will be in that. But you can only be so far behind this team where at the beginning, which is if Philly doesn't take their foot off the gas, I think they're still going to be able to land in that spot.
So I would then push, like, you don't need, if there's Miami, I think is a given for the top 4. Charlotte is right now with them. Then there's Cincy, there's Red Bulls, there's Atlanta, Orlando, Columbus, and Chicago hot start, right? So those are, I guess, so you're putting
I'm not
Philly
sold on a single one of those teams outside of Inter Miami at the level of Philadelphia.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, I think that you could find way. I won't be shocked if they're in a conversation with those groups, but where Red Bull stand right now, where Charlotte stands right now, where Orlando stands, Nashville, those are 2 teams we're going to talk about in a moment. Yeah, I don't think that there's a clear reason why those teams are better than this Philly group.
I just want to remind you we're 5 games into the season. And last year, Toronto FC had 3 wins and a draw in their first 5 games. And I think that's the funniest example I could come
Well, John Herdman's a great coach. Come on. That guy knows everything the opponent's doing. It's like he's watched tape of them before or something like that. That is how you get those results early on. It was your birthday on Saturday, by the way. Did you know that Insigne was starting? Like,
I saw a tweet and I thought, I was like, I'm really not that drunk right now. Like, Jesus Christ. Like, somebody, I was like, oh, shit. Oh, he is starting.
Someone comes up to you, they're like, oh, by the way, Pele's in the starting lineup for NYCFC. It's like, what? And Insigne for Toronto. Oh, no way.
The brewery didn't get MLS season pass on Apple TV, unfortunately.
Shocking. That is absolutely shocking to me. Yeah. That is
it.
jarring information. Here was my deep cut one for this. Jovan Lukic, MLS All-Star. Buying or selling?
No. Go 10 toes down where you started.
Oh, best 11.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I was, in the rundown meeting, I said Jovan Lukic, best 11. And then as I went to say, or All-Star, you had already jumped down my throat, so we didn't even get there.
And so this isn't even, what one this is. I think that this is a sweet story. To say best 11 is deep. But like, even in his defense, dudes don't vote defensive mids 8s as best 11. They should. You and I, that's what we put in our vote. We talk about it on these podcasts, on whatever, right? Like, there's, the players who vote for, Columbus or for San Jose don't think that they're going to sneak Jovan Lukic into their ballot.
This is kind of was his issue at Spartak Subotic as well. I remember the conversation in the Spartak Reddit chat was that, he was not getting the respect he deserved because of position. I had to Google the team.
Any one of like eight countries, I think you could convince me.
Yeah. He's been awesome this year.
Yes, he has.
As is Danley. It's not just him. He broke the goal in New England, I think it was, with the shot that hit the back of the net. So he could strike it. He covers a ton of ground. This team is pressing high, and yet they're not leaving gaps in between. And he's a big part of that. And it's allowed Quinn Sullivan to have a lot of freedom. And it's allowed Gazdag to do what he does best, which is go and be a third forward or a second forward and find the game. They have been awesome. If Philly maintains up here, he should definitely be an all-star the way he's playing. And so I'm going to buy this. Not only am I going to buy this, I'm going to buy this. I'm going to start selling stock to it because I know that it's going to appreciate value as time goes along.
You are going to start a lobbying firm to be near the commissioner's office to get Jovan Lukic as a commissioner's or a coach's pick. If Philly are top, like, oh, no, it'd be Austin who's the coach, right? The coach, like that. That's who makes the coach's pick. Okay, so you're at a deficit there because that's a Western Conference team on top of
Nico Estevez knows ball. If he knows the game, if he's deep in it, he knows that this is happening. I don't know about the upper levels, but if you're like sitting there, you sense it on a Saturday night. You're like, oh, whoa. Jovan Lukic at it again. Claude Makelele working right now in Philadelphia.
I don't want to speak this into existence, but it would be funny if we revisit this conversation in 5 weeks and it's like Indy Vasilev and Danley.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. Also, Indy, by the way, good piece of depth that they picked up. Another sign of it.
No, they didn't trade for him to be depth. I'll tell you that much.
No, but I'm saying it gives you another option, allows you to move pieces around, allows you to get results in games like this against St. Louis, who could have used Indy Vasilev in all of this. You've got a couple spoon race teams.
I think we could just do these together because I think we're going to say a lot of the same things.
Sporting Kansas City and New England, buying or selling them in the spoon race.
Buy. Stronger buy on Kansas
Which one do you think finishes better this season between the two?
New England.
Oh, really? I would say Sporting Kansas City.
Look at this. Some disagreement. Go ahead, Goss. You go first.
Hold
on. And this is funny. We're going to be arguing, and it's like overall Supporters Shield standings of like 30th versus 27th.
Exactly. This isn't, again, this is not me saying that this team is like going to be elite or whatever. I like what I see from Shapi Suleimanov. I like Manu Garcia as well. I think they've added pieces. Joveljic will score goals.
I agree.
Agata will score goals. Like, there's enough there for when it settles in that they'll have ways to get results. And I don't know, they're like stuck in this way of being a bad team where they continue to be the same bad team, but that might be better than being a poisonous group that no one really knows each other. And so they might be able to maintain performances through the end of the year like they did last year, right? To make the Open Cup run they did while having the regular season they had shows that like people are still kind of playing hard for Peter Vermees, as bad as it is.
Sure.
I like Logan Ndembe. He's back now, so that gives you another option. You could move Jake Davis around as well. So, yeah, I would take this, even with what I've seen this year, I would take this Sporting Kansas City group over New England right now for this year.
I agree with most of what you just said. I like the attacking pieces. I like them all. Can Shapi Suleimanov play center back? Can he play 6? They've needed a number 6 since they decided we're too good for you, Ilya Sanchez. Do you remember that?
Here's a theory. Here's an idea. You start Ceballos and Fofana and Brandon Bai and whoever else at left back for Sporting Kansas City, and then you take Sporting KC's attack and you put it on top of that, and you've got a perfect team.
You got a really good team, yeah.
Yeah.
I like that team right there. So that's it for me. Is that like, yeah, that's nice. I love the Jovic signing. Like yes, that like it mirrors like Hugo Kuiper's last year when it was like, yeah, like I think he's a really good player. It's just, you know, if he doesn't score a ton of goals, I don't think it's on him. Like I think it's more of a reflection of the team than him. So Jovic, if you can get that deal done, you go get that deal done. Manu Garcia, like I've said, my early impressions of him are good. Shabi Suleimanov, early impressions are good. That's nice. They don't have a 6. They might have one center back. And if Danny Rosero gets injured, gets even worse really quickly, if Jacob Bartlett does what teenagers do and has some blips, like they're gonna be in trouble again at defensive mid. Fullback depth gets to Kyrie Shelton really quickly. Goalkeepers, there's question mark. Like again, that's nice. The attack is cute. I like it. They need. I honest to God, I think that they need 4 new starters in the back 6.
Yeah. Now, on the flip side, New England has the worst attack in Major League Soccer. They have it in reality, the lack of scoring goals. They've not scored a goal themselves the entire season. They've only scored on an own goal, and their XG is the worst in Major League Soccer.
1.67. Second last is Toronto at 3.76. Yes, they've played another game, but I think New England could play 3 more games. Like, yes, I'm also not suggesting New England are about to make the playoffs. But I will say, I know that if this doesn't change, Caleb Porter ain't finishing this season. I don't think that that's some great insider analysis insight. I think it's just a pretty obvious thing that this ain't, you got last year, and that was your, like we were talking about, should he lose his job this winter? No, we're not going to get there at the end of the season if it doesn't get better. And I think, hypothetically speaking, you could start with an interim manager. I think that they would, like, that could be the new manager balance. I think if you put Gio Savarese in charge of this team, I think if you put, I don't know, I'm trying to think of other like Jim
Laurent
Kirk, right?
Courtois is available.
Laurent Courtois, whatever. I think that, and I don't think that that's happening in Kansas City. And again, it's weird to say. I don't even necessarily think or know if Peter Vermees is 100% the problem, but this is what happens in global soccer. You fire the manager, you can't fire all the players. New England fire all the players, and now they still might need to fire all the manager. So I just think that there's more upside with this New England team. Yes, the attack is embarrassing, but like I look at the individual pieces, and again, this could be just me being stubborn, and I'm looking at Carlos Hill, I'm looking at Ganago, I'm looking at Leo Campana, and I'm like, and Langoni, and thinking this should all be better than it is. And again, I could just be being very stubborn, and in game 30, I'm gonna be like, well, maybe this is the week that they scored a couple goals, but it just makes so much more sense to me.
Campana obviously out hurt. Carlos Hill not connecting with the pieces around him. There is still a lack of control in central midfield defensively, and so that I think leads to them not committing as many numbers forward as they can. Yep. In all of this, I don't really have a setup to be like, oh, we're going to write these down and guarantee them in a way. We don't have a phrase for it. Ben Bear, of course, could loan us the guarantee phrase. And shout out to the person who tweeted at Ben Bear last week or 2 weeks ago and was like, had this really good point on his show Soccer-Wise. Like, that's brutal. Like, we don't even work in the same space anymore. So that was a tough one for me. But we're going to have to figure out something to put this down. You've got SKC, or I've got SKC, you've got New England, and Jovan Lukic for All-Star. We're going to have to really put our chests next to these.
1 point from the chat from Up the Loons. How have we not talked about Daniel Showey's mustache? That gives Kansas City an obvious advantage over the Revs. And that's on me. 1,000% on me. You're right. I should have brought that up to start my analysis.
Yeah, you weren't ready for the performance. Beautiful. Yeah, you're not ready at a high level. Let's do the next one. Nashville. Nashville's had a good run over the last few weeks. You could say some of it is fool's gold, maybe. They beat Montreal 3-0 at home in their last game. That's a Montreal team that, of course, just fired their manager. They beat Portland 2-0 in the game before that with the 2 penalty kick saves in that one as well. They went and lost to the Red Bulls. They drew New England at home. And then the big result for them is the 3-1 win at Philadelphia. It was a smash and grab, but like great. You were able to change what you wanted to do. They've been very methodical in possession, especially in the home games. And the Red Bull game, because Red Bulls don't want the ball and they scored early, and so the game states allowed that. they've gotten more and more dangerous in that style as the season's gone along. And so there's some positivity there for Nashville. Are you buying or selling this Nashville team, who I believe are currently top 4 in the Eastern Conference?
Well, so we'll go back. Do you tell me what is up for sale, or what is to be purchased? Is it a playoff team? Is it
top 6?
Top 6? I wouldn't go that far. I will say they are definitely better than I thought they were going to be, particularly this quickly. Just in the cohesiveness. Like last season, I liked some of the things under BJ Callahan. It just still felt a little disjointed, and you'd hope that a preseason would smooth some of that over, but you never really know till you see it. And you never really know, hey, is Hani Mukhtar going to get back to where he was? A couple of these new signings. They're better than I thought they were going to be. I thought that they were going to be closer to the bottom of the East than the playoff line. I think that they've proven pretty quickly that they're good. I won't go as far as top 6. What I will say, though, to go back to the positive side, Zimmerman playing every minute, I think that's important just because he is so important in this team. He is the DP for this team. It's impressive to me that Hani Mukhtar does not have an open play goal, and their attack is still looking good because we're so conditioned to, if Hani Mukhtar isn't supernatural, this team is really boring to watch. And Tagseth has been super fun. Surge has been, I wouldn't say that he's lighting the world on fire with 1 goal, 1 assist, right? But I think he's been fine, and I think that it's fit better. All of this to say is they advanced to a point that I didn't think that they were going to so quickly. I don't think that they're going to be a top 6 team in the East, but they're better than I thought they were. Not worth anything, but for whatever that's worth.
They should sign Moranchuk. Atlanta should just sell them Moranchuk because what else is he doing? And they need a piece. They need one more piece in the attack. I agree with a lot of what you said. Tagseth, just like really high level soccer player, makes good runs out of midfield when, similar to what I was talking about with the US, where it's like the game kind of feels settled, and then his run's able to change the shape of the opponent, or he goes and wins a corner kick or a throw in for the other team deep in the half that they can go press on. Like, he reads those moments well. He's clean in possession. He keeps the game going. Brugman back from injury. He's another guy where like it's not consistent. He's not an attacking piece totally, although we saw in the MLS Cup, but like he'll break lines with the perfect pass every once in a while, and that will be enough for them to break out. A lot of what goes well for them is the movement underneath, whether it's Surge and another player or whatever, underneath those forward players. It's what we saw for the breakthrough goal from Wheel in this one. And like you said, Surge has not been unbelievable, but he is confident right now in his movements of like, he knows when he's going down the left channel that he's going to cut back and hit it with his right, and he's getting there most of the time. Yeah. He's not always burying it, or a second defender comes in, but like the motions and the actions are correct and there. I think they are a team that I'm hoping is lurking around, and as teams have players where it's like, oh, we thought this player would be a bigger piece of what we were going to do, they're not. Is there a TAM attacking player out there in the league that can bring it as things go along? But I would say this, they're 4th in the East right now. I think there are 3 to 5 teams below them that I expected to be better, and from what I've seen so far this year, I think still could be. So I think they're hanging around that 7th spot, and I think that's a fair line, but I would probably sell on that. But here is the real question everyone wants to know. Currently, Andy Najar is 3rd in Major League Soccer in successful take-ons. That includes missing the last game because he was with with Honduras in an international game. Do you buy or sell that? Will he finish top 5 in successful take-ons?
I don't think so. It would be pretty electric if he did, but I don't think so. It's a high bar.
This is what everyone's talking about. This is like has MLS on fire right now. He's been an awesome addition. To go from paying Shaq Moore to now getting Andy Najar and having the way higher level performances has been huge for this Nashville team. Yeah, he probably won't finish in this number. With Andy Najar, it's like 50% health. That's the biggest question mark. And then it feels like the game model is open for him to do this. Daniel Lovitz doesn't really penetrate like that. He either gets to the outside or hits across or pinches inside, becomes more of a 3rd central midfielder. And so the space is there for Andy Najar. I'm buying this, baby. Andy Najar, top 5.
Hell
Let's
yeah.
go. The next one, Orlando. Number 1 attack right now in Major League Soccer on non-penalty expected goals. Are you buying or selling this? The context being they have scored 8 goals in 2 home games against TFC and DC United.
I'm buying that they're going to be top 10 attack. Wouldn't like number one. I think that's too steep. But like Pasalic is really good, and he's hit immediately, and he makes sense. But the Luis Muriel resurgence, I'm not gonna lie to you, I considered him as my last Golden Boot draft pick.
Yeah, of course you did. No, yeah, of course, yeah.
But I didn't have the stones to do it, and every time he scores, I'm so much more disappointed in myself.
Well, I drafted Ramiro Enrique, so this has gone poorly for me so far. I think I actually have him on two different things because I did an Austin FC fantasy draft. I think I took Ramiro Enrique in that one as well. Just saying, like, well, if he's going to start, he's going to score goals. Yeah. The mural stuff's been fun. Like, he's a fun soccer player. And when we saw him last year, it's like coming off the bench with Duncan McGuire. He's dropping in. He's playing crosses, whatever. Scores a banger of a goal against NYCFC. He does it again this week. Like, he's an elite finisher when he's in spots. So if he does enough other work, it's going to be fun to watch him. I also appreciate him keeping Goss Theorem in everyone's hearts and minds. So I appreciate that from him as well. And I'll buy everything you were buying on their Orlando tack as well. For Vancouver, we've talked about them a ton. I wanted to go deep cut on this one. You want to go high level. Where do you want to start?
So we're putting the line at top 3 in the West?
Okay.
I hate to be boring, but like, I think I'm still gonna sell that. I think that they'll be in the mix for that, and I wish I could give you a better answer to be like, these are the 3 teams I expect to be above them.
That's the question.
Like, it's so wide open in this conference. So I think LAFC would be the safe one. Minnesota, and jeez, I don't know. It's tough to get to a third team. I think that 3rd through like 10th is going to be separated by a couple points. So we're really splitting hairs here where like maybe I don't think that they're going to be top 3, but I think that they're going to be in that mix.
Yeah, the obvious thing for Vancouver would be deep CCC runs normally means you struggle in league play, and that would be
Daniel Rios, you don't need to worry.
What?
When you have Daniel Rios, you don't need to worry about
it. Yeah, obviously. And if you just win the thing, then that's all that really matters. So once they've won the CONCACAF Champions Cup this time, then it won't really matter after that. So that's an obvious one. The other one being that maybe they're not the deepest group, although they've shown trust in a lot of pieces in this team. I thought they played well against Chicago, even with how depleted they were in this one. It's hard to think they'll maintain it for the full year. I will take them being top 5, I think, right now for this Vancouver team. I don't have 3 teams as well in that. I think Minnesota is a good one to start. LAFC are an obvious one, even though some of the underlying numbers aren't amazing. They're probably going to continue to get better. There is a lot of new pieces in that group, and so there's some like leeway for that. And then I don't have a third team in that to like push in. I guess San Diego might be one, but I don't know that I would trust San Diego to maintain over Vancouver so far.
Seattle for me still.
Yeah, but like as you get into injuries, now we're getting into Club World Cup. Like how much does that take out of them? There's question marks with all these groups. The Western Conference is fun and interesting. I think Joe Lowry wrote it up that like it has struggled against the East so far this year because the Eastern Conference is better and more established. But that's where we stand right now. Let's finish with this one. We are going to, based it based off the top 2 statistical goalkeepers on underlying numbers. We have Zach Steffen and CJ Dos Santos tied at the top for the best post-shot XG minus goals conceded. So the shots you're expected to concede minus the goals you actually concede tells you how much of a difference maker those goalkeepers are. You have Zach Steffen, you have CJ Dos Santos in there. Are you buying or selling on these 2 players?
I'm buying the 2 players. But Zach Steffen, it was like the first couple games of the season, particularly the first one, his post-shot XG versus goals conceded was just a hole he couldn't dig himself out of. And then his best performances came in the Leagues Cup, which didn't impact his MLS stat on that one. So the numbers that showed what he was last year, he wasn't anywhere near that bad. I don't think that he'll quite be towards the top, but I think that this is fair for him. CJ Dos Santos, giving him a little love here. San Diego really liked him as they identified him to want to make him their starting goalkeeper. But a non-negotiable was you need to be able to play it out of the back. And they're still getting the shot stopping from him that I think has been just a pleasant surprise. So I've been very impressed with both of these players.
Yeah, he was under barrage against Austin with all the breakaways. Didn't concede that many goals, so that probably helps. I would assume this number is skewed because Austin refuses to make the right pass in the final third, and so that helps him a little bit. But San Diego's structure, unless what we saw against Austin, which doesn't feel like it's going to be the biggest issue because there were so many pieces missing in this one, at center back, at left back, in central midfield, like it feels like San Diego was playing a C group overall. I think the structure in front of him will be clean enough that for the most part, the game will be in front of him. And if you don't concede a ton of goals, you keep confidence. And it feels like so far he is clean enough that he will make the saves he should. So I'm going to take that one as well. I think the Zach Steffen number will come down. I like Zach Steffen. I think his positioning around before a lot of shots is really odd, and he gets himself in some tough spots. He makes great saves, but he is normally or oftentimes out of positions for the goals that are conceded. And Colorado are going to continue to press and open up. Like this Portland game was an outlier because the Atencio own goal is absurd, and then the game kind of fell apart on them. But like they're going to concede chances, they're going to concede goals. So I think Zach Steffen drops off this number even more. We've got a Brad Stuver shout in the chat for someone who should be in there. Brad Stuver has been one of the best goalies in the league the last few years, so I think that one's fair as well. And that's our last one on buying and selling. I am buying that we will be back together on Thursday. I am selling that you will be there tomorrow. I'll be with Jordan Angeli to do our entire NWSL recap. Mark Krikorian stepping down in Washington. Man U, Brazilian attacking player coming to Gotham as well. So a lot to talk about there. Tom, congratulations for turning 30 years old. And thank you for joining me on the dark side of life, on the other side of the moon. Thank you to all of you for joining us. Thank you to all of you in the chat for getting involved. And we'll talk to you all again very, very soon.